All right. Hello, and welcome to the Lonely Gamer panel. I am your moderator. I am Perrianne Lurie. I am wearing my con badge, see, in a GCOM badge holder and my EuroQuest shirt. The games in the picture behind me are not mine. I don't think I own a single one of those games, but it was a gaming picture. I am a Euro-style board gamer. And I'm on the board of GCOM, and I have been a GM at EuroQuest and Congress of Gamers. And I run the game room at Capclave, which will be October 1st through 3rd at the Rockville Hilton, live and in person. And so why don't you all go around and introduce yourselves? I will call on you because the pictures are in different orders on different people's screens. So Mildred, you are first on my screen, so you can go first.
Hi, I'm Mildred Cady. I am a longtime gamer and participant in the podcast community, crafter and such. I am now from the Boston area and do in-game, convention gaming, waiting for the first one I can get to that's in person, although I don't think I'm making it Gen Con. And yeah, I play way too many games apparently.
Oh, and I forgot to say that if you have a question that you want the panel to address, you should use the Q&A function and type it in there, not the chat function, which I am not particularly monitoring. Alyssa, you are next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I am Alyssa Winans. I'm an illustrator and animator living in California, and I used to work in games. I still sort of work in games on the Google Doodle team. And probably most relevantly, I run a game club in the style of a book club at my workplace. So that's where I learn
review games? You discuss games?
I don't know if reviewers, yes, we discuss games.
Okay. All right, John.
I am John Walker. I play like Millie. I play way too many games. I'm also an author. I've just released my 13th book a month ago or so. And yeah, I have let's see. I have an Xbox, PS4, Switch, and a gaming PC because I'm a nerd.
Okay, and finally, last but not least, Christiana.
Hello, I'm Christiana. I also live in the Boston area. I am an author in my part-time. That's not showing very well. My latest book, Phyllis Esposito, Interdimensional Private Eye. But I also play lots and lots of games. I play video games. I've played video games pretty much my whole life. I play them all the time now, but I also, in the last 5 years or so, have gotten way into tabletop role-playing games. And so I have actually, for a little over 4 years now, streamed a live actual play Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And we've played a couple of other games in there too. We're into our second campaign now, but we've also played fate-based games and Burn Bright and a number of other one-shot sorts of things. And I've also recently played some solo mode tabletop RPGs.
Excellent. So the panel description talks about electronic mini number of solo play offline titles. And how do you discover the best one-player games for you? We're going to go beyond that question and talk about all sorts of gaming type stuff that you can do, on your own without other people. What I can talk about are gaming apps that have an AI or multiple AIs that you can play against. So I can start with that, and then we can move on to some other topic. I own some board games that have solitaire modes. I have not played the solo mode on any one of my games, so I have no idea how good they are. But on the gaming apps, I play a lot against the AI on my iPad. And so the first one on my list here is Scrabble, which I don't play against other people because I have some issues with the connection for some reason that I don't understand. But I play against the AI and sometimes win. Ticket to Ride has a bunch of different AIs that you can play against. There's like different levels if you're only playing the base game, which is good because you can do like the harder AI to play against. But if you're playing like 1910 expansion, they're all stupid. But, you know, it is what it is. Takanoko, which is also known as the Panda game, which is a really pretty game in person. The app is actually pretty decent. And there's AIs you can play against. I don't think I've beaten them yet, but I haven't played it that much. Quirkle has a really nice app, and there's different levels of AI you can play against. That one works pretty well. San Juan, again, has different levels of AI you can play against. Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy both have AIs you can play against. Star Realms I play all the time against like the hard AI, and I win maybe 30% of the time. And Mystic Veil has AIs you can play against as well. So those are the ones that I've been wasting my time on, actually since before the pandemic, although I might have added a few since the pandemic began. All right, Mildred, do you want to go next?
I also play Carcassonne, Monopoly, and Clue solo, which are like well-known board games, but also I play a Risk style game called Strategery, which technically has multiplayer mode, but I've never done a multiplayer game just because of the timing. But so I actually don't have a console. I've never personally owned a console, so that may be more of some other people. Right now I mainly get my games kind of word of mouth or from watching some of my favorite YouTubers. So, and a lot of searching through Steam. So what I've been playing recently, I do have one of the constant clicker games going on called Realm Grinder.
You might want to tell us what a constant clicker game is.
It's so basically it'll run in the background. It technically automatically clicks every so often to generate resources, or you can mash your mouse button yourself a lot to make it go faster, and then you just keep building up your base game, cookie, bakery, whatever the theme is. This is a little kingdom, and then you reset and start over again, but with bigger bonuses, and just it's really, really, really mindless. Recently I picked up a game called Mr. Prepper, which is a basically end of civilization as we know it style prepper scenario strategy sort of game. You're going through fulfilling tasks, making sure you have enough supplies, that sort of thing. And tower defense games. Most of my games do have an have the option for a multiplayer, but I tend to play by myself mainly because my poor laptop is a little behind the times, and I can't even play Destiny 2 solo on it without like crashing all the time. So next.
Okay, Alyssa.
Hi. Are we specifically still talking about apps or just our area of expertise? Okay, well, I'll talk a little bit about video game type stuff then.
Okay.
But in terms of, there's just big problem is like there's so many to choose from because there are just so many single player games in the realm of video games. But in terms of where to find a lot of them, I found Humble Bundle is a website that will often kind of package a couple of like kind of more bite-sized games, and they do it sort of periodically. So even if you don't want to buy all of those games, I do find it can be a nice introduction to just see what's out there and kind of see what piques your interest. Because I think the thing about games is everybody sort of has different tastes. So you might really like puzzle games, but then everybody might be playing like Destiny 2, which I don't think is a puzzle game. So sometimes, friend recs might not work there, but investigating there. Also, if you're a fan of kind of more wholesome games, which maybe you are, maybe you're not, there is a Twitter that I've advertises kind of some small, like wholesome indie games, which is also nice and bite-sized. So if you have technical limitations, like your laptop is slow or your connection is a little rough, I find indie games tend to run a little bit nicer because they're usually shorter experiences. So those are some good places to find games. In terms of things that I've been playing during the quarantine, I found, well, at our game club, there were some games that rose to the top. I would recommend A Short Hike, which I find like kind of people who liked all sorts of different kinds of games did really like this game. So even if you have a broad range of tastes, it's just sort of a short experience where you are flying around and exploring this island, and it's kind of a more, it's a little bit of a narrative game, but it's also a feel-good game, which I think we've all been kind of going through hard times. So maybe some folks were looking for more of that sort of thing. Those would be my initial recs.
Thank you. John?
Well, I usually find like Alyssa, building up with Alyssa, Humble Bundle, just you can get so many great games from there. Plus you're helping charity. So I throw that out there as often as possible. As far as what I'm playing, where I also there's a gaming thread on a site called fark.com. That's FARK. Don't ask where they got the name. And also Twitch. Twitch gives me just games that I would never think to play, and like, oh hey, cool, and give it a try. As far as what I'm playing, sometimes I'll go old school and just go. I say old school. Skyrim, just for the 800th time this year. I'll start a new character, and I'm a stealth archer again. So, but also I've been doing with Mass Effect. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition just came out for on console and everything else. So I've been living that for the last, yes. So.
Okay, and Christiana?
I do play a lot of video games as well. Nothing wrong with any of that, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tabletop RPGs. So, in particular, the one that I've probably spent the most time with is called Ironsworn, and it also has a new version, a science fiction version called Ironsworn Starforged that just like in the last couple of days completed its very successful Kickstarter. And these are tabletop RPGs, somewhat in the vein of, a Dungeons and Dragons type of game, if you're not familiar with other tabletop RPGs, in the sense that you're rolling dice, you have character that you build and all of that sort of thing. But the way that Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged have a mode for solo play, it includes lots of tables that you can roll on randomly to kind of take the place of what a dungeon master might do in a more traditional tabletop RPG experience. And it's actually quite a lot of fun. I've live streamed a few sessions of playing those modes. It's really great. And then also there's a couple of either like map drawing or journaling type of solo games. There's Field Guide to Memory, which is a journaling sort of game where you get various different prompts and then you're essentially like writing in a journal or a diary as the character based on the prompts that you get. And then there's a map drawing game called Delve, where you're delving into a mine and you draw random cards from a deck of cards to help you discover what happens next when you dig deeper, and it turns out, oh well, there's a vein of iron, or there's an ancient tomb with a mummy in it, and so on.
So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure game?
Sort of, although basically instead of it saying, if you choose to go through the door, turn to page 16. If you choose to go through, the window, it's more like I'm choosing to dig deeper into the mine, and I draw from a deck of cards, and the deck of cards has a prompt for each card that says, you find something mysterious but dangerous. What is it? And then you decide what it is, and then you just continue the fiction based on these prompts.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Back when I was young, which was a long time ago, I played a lot of those Infocom text-based adventure games, which were all, solitaire games. I believe that they re-released all of those recently for free somewhere on the internet. I remember reading that somewhere. So if you want to play The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and put the Babelfish in your ear, you can do that. I remember playing that one, and I played, there was one called Mind Forever Voyaging, where you kept jumping into different people. And there was Leather Goddesses of Phobos, and a bunch of others that were not science fiction related. And then, of course, there was Zork. Remember Zork? You're all too young.
Oh, no.
No, I'm actually not too young.
In my day, there were a bunch of twisty passages all alike, and we liked it.
Actually, retro gaming is a really good source for solo games. The idea of being able to play with other people in real time is still fairly new. You can even just jump back 10 years and the technology's changed so much.
Yeah, back then there were turn-based games where you would do something and then you'd wait a week for your other player to do something and then you'd come back to it. I never had the patience for that. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, you should type them into the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen if you're on a PC. I don't know where it is on other various devices. Recently I've been having, small numbers of people over to my house to actually play board games, which is nice because I've certainly missed that. But I haven't actually done any of the solo modes on any of my board games, although I know things like Wingspan and Lewis and Clark and CO2 all have solo modes available. I'm sure there are others that I own that have solo modes, but I haven't played any of those. So I don't know how good they are.
I have,
Go ahead.
So I have a couple of the complicated board games that I bought out of more like ambition of like, wouldn't it be fun to play that if I knew people who were interested in playing it? And now I have it on a shelf. But there's a couple of times I think it is an underrated experience to take one of those complicated games and actually just play through it yourself. Now, some of them are not designed for a single player, but what you can actually do is just set it up for more than one player and then
play both of them. Play both of them.
play
Yeah.
both sides. And especially there's one in particular called Root, a game
Yes,
of
I played
woodland
Root.
might and right. And the interesting thing about that one is that because the different factions all have slightly different mechanics, it's much less of a factor of you having to outthink yourself and that being awkward, because each player faction really has different objectives.
Yes, they
that
have
lead-
different victory conditions. So.
Right. So it's pretty easy to jump from one seat to another without having to say, I'm going to have to pretend now that I don't know that the other player is going to do this. It's like, so that one is a lot of fun to to explore that way. I think there's a lot of those complicated games that can be fun that way if you are lacking people to play with in the real world.
Actually, I just remembered there's also a number of card deck-based games that are that you can really do solo. For me, my most recent experience is Paizo with their Pathfinder system developed a Pathfinder adventure card game, and you can print out scenarios, and I think at least one's included with each box or with now each expansion deck, and you can either have different people playing different characters, or you can go through the game like a game round yourself on your own. And I think like Ascension, you can do a solo mode on. Trying to think some others off the top of my head, but actually even with the Pathfinder one, there's even an organized play option for it, so you can be playing solo, but then submit your stats and such to Paizo, and you get society level credit for it, which is kind of interesting.
So when you're playing this game by yourself, do you do all the different voices for the characters?
That's optional. I will not say whether I've done that or not. Those who know me will know the answer to that.
Building off what Millie's talking about with deck building games, but going back to PC gaming, there are several new deck building games have just really come into their own, I think. For example, there's one that I've been playing like I owe it money, is Fights in Tight Spaces. It's very simplistic, it's very easy, and it's pretty much if Bruce Lee and John Wick had a baby and made a video game. Okay, just as far as mechanics and everything, but it's really a lot. It really goes to show how versatile the whole deck building game genre has gotten. You've got oh god, was it Ring of Pain or something like that, or Circle of Pain or something like that, that just looks great, and it's a single player. There's no multiplayer. It's you're by yourself, you're playing it, and there you go. So I think deck building for solo players is where you're going to see a glut of games coming out for that. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Just to add on a recommendation there, I recently played a game called Signs of the Sojourner, and that game is a deck building game, but it's different in that you play the cards as a conversation with NPC characters in the game as a conversation. So you build this deck that's actually your sort of conversational tool set, and then you use your deck to advance through the narrative of the game. So it's kind of interesting seeing that.
What was the name of it?
Signs of the Sojourner. I'll type in.
Oh, thank you.
But it's kind of interesting to see people starting to play with that sort of setup in different ways and formats.
I think that one of the key elements to making any kind of a solo mechanic work for a tabletop RPG is that you need something to replace the invention of the dungeon master or the game master. And so you can have just some sort of a resource like tables, or that you roll a percentile dice, or you draw from a deck of cards or something to produce some sort of a random element. But a lot of the games will do a really great job of having those tables be very elaborate. And so if you're in a situation where you have found a derelict spacecraft and you want to know, okay, well, what's inside when I explore it? And there will be a table, say, and this is Ironsworn Starforged that's like this, and the table will say, okay, well, you roll this percentile dice and it says, oh, you enter the ship in the engineering group. And you can imagine, well, what's that like? And then you can say that, there's a table for the sorts of dangers that might be in engineering and that sort of thing. And through that, you build the narrative in your mind, but it offers these little randomized or surprising story points to build from.
Go ahead.
I
Mildred?
also just thought there's a lot of times where if you find a demo for a video game, the demo will be single player, whether it's a prologue or a test version or something like that. Even if the game itself then goes on to be multiplayer, you can at least get a taste for the game in a solo mode first. Also, usually any video game, your tutorial mode will also be in solo.
Yeah,
version.
I think that's true for the board gaming apps as well, that all the tutorials are basically, showing you how the game works. And so that's all just you learning how to navigate the game. But it also teaches you how the game is played if it were a board game, as opposed to how the app works. I see no questions in the Q&A.
We
I
are
have a
really,
question.
really good at our jobs. Okay.
Yeah, I guess
We are the
so.
greatest of all time.
Yeah, right.
But to build on that, as far as yes, I have unfortunately noticed though that some just tiny tangent, promise, just a tiny tangent / rant. That some games that have been traditionally single player, there have been pushes to bring in multiplayer. Fallout 76, and it's really that they're losing that part of what makes the single player experience better than, I mean, yeah, it'd be great to run around the wasteland with my friends, but not like this. It really gets, that really bugs me. Okay, rant over.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Okay.
Those of you who are veteran tabletop gamers and have been maybe playing some of them online, maybe against computer players, how does that feel playing against AI as opposed to playing against your friends and things like that? Does it really, does it hold up, or does it feel like it's missing something?
Well, you don't have any of the table talk that you have with your friends. Board gaming is a social activity. So it's a different sort of experience than it would be if you're sitting in a room and, chatting with your friends over a game. But I guess it's not that different from like, a tournament at WBC where, they discourage that sort of thing because they're all so damn serious about everything.
The AI cheats. Okay, the AI cheats, and you can't throw it out because then you throw out your computer. So
yeah, well, most of the AIs are too stupid to cheat. I have this game that I didn't talk about, which is a version of Skippo, which they took down. So they replaced it with this other thing called Skip Solitaire, which is basically Skippo, but not Milton Bradley. And the AIs like help each other. If you're playing against like multiple AIs, like they're stupid, but they do things that will help the other AI players, which they shouldn't be doing if they were smart. So I think they're in cahoots, actually. This is not right, but Alyssa, did you have? I think you wanted to say something. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, in the game I mentioned earlier, Strategery, some of the players will, like AI players, the AI will do something detrimental to its own winning scenario in order to screw you over.
Well, that's okay. I can live with that. If they're trying to screw me over, I understand that.
But
they should be trying to win. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also won't take advantage of another play AI's weaknesses to attack you instead. But I was just about to think of something. Back to the trying to shoehorn a multiplayer into a solo game. Part of the problem is, I think, some of the things that make good solo games don't necessarily make good multiplayer games. So it's if they're not very, very careful, they're going to lose that experience. But then to shift to Alyssa's question, one of the things that I found is with playing board games in a solitaire mode is that, yes, I'm missing the interaction with other players, but it also means that I don't get into arguments with the players who think they're know-it-alls and try to tell you how to play the game.
Rules lawyer. Sorry.
So, like with tabletop RPGs, that's one of the classic like experiences where like the definitive experience that people think of generally kind of requires a lot of other people, because that's kind of the shared bonding experience of the discovery of it. And so when you don't have the other players there, it is a very different experience. But I think in my, the ones that I've played, when you're doing a solo mode, it's leans into what is different about doing it by yourself. So, for example, in either Ironsworn or Starforged, the idea that you are this one, uh, individual who is out there doing things on their own, as opposed to doing it with a whole big crew and enjoying the solitude or the danger of being by yourself in a way that is not generally something you're going to experience in a D&D game where you have a full party all the time. Likewise, in a journaling game like Field Guide to Memory, it's also solitary, but you can really just get into it's a completely different format. You're writing in a journal while role playing, and then you have this physical artifact at the end that can be a lot of fun. But it's certainly true that like even in Starforged or whatever, like when I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends or any other game like that, I enjoy the performative aspects of role playing. And when you're playing solo, it's a little weirder to do that for an audience of one. I mean, it's not to say that you can't, but it's different than when you're doing it to impress your friends.
Right. I've found that the same kind of problem with people telling you what to do in the cooperative games that I've tried to play. It tends, like I don't play Pandemic because that's what I used to do for a living, even before the pandemic. I've retired now, but it was too much like work. But there's usually one or two people that tell everybody else what to do all the time. And so it may be fun for those one or two people, but for everybody else, it's really annoying. So I think you could actually play most of those cooperative games by being all the characters as the one person running them all. And that would probably work. Although there's like secret information that you're not supposed to share with people that would make it harder to do. But I think there's a way to make that happen. I just don't.
So the way that it works in the ones that I've played is instead of it being pre-planned, it tends to be more discovery. So like the idea of I don't know what is around that corner, and it's scary to explore it, but I don't know what's around the corner. Well, what's around the corner? I roll on the die, and that way it's still sort of a discovery and it's surprising, but there didn't have to be someone else who already knew it. And I think a lot of there's a lot of these tabletop RPGs or other sorts of games of that nature that work with that mechanic even when you are, in a group, like, so-called GM-less games or, just other games. Like there's a very simple but nuanced and deep game called For the Queen, where you can have any number of people, but the way that it works is just everyone, you shuffle this special deck. It's not a regular standard deck of cards, but it's a deck for the game. And each card has just a question on it. So you establish up front at the beginning of that game that you are part of a retinue accompanying a queen on a dangerous diplomatic mission. But then you just take turns drawing cards off the deck, and each one has a question, and you answer that question for your character. But generally speaking, you don't establish anything about who you are up front. You don't build a character first to start. You discover that by answering the questions in the moment.
That sounds so fun.
It's very fun. It's a great game. That's For the Queen. And that's a good example of one that you could play solo. I think the fiction of the game generally assumes that you're going to have a larger group of people, like it's just sort of an assumption, but you could just have those other people be, not player, NPCs essentially.
NPCs.
Yeah, but you're just building you don't ever have them answering the questions. It's just, you're the only person doing that. But otherwise, it could really work in a very similar way, because it's really just about giving you these randomized story prompts that invite you to write the story in your own mind.
Writing a story? It
What?
would never work.
I tell you,
No.
my game of Ironsworn, which is the fantasy version of the Starforged, that just through the various random events that happened in there, I like that. I feel like that I would read that book, the story that got developed that way, and I've thought about whether I should try to write it like that, but I haven't so far.
I'd read it. And to me, it really shows how games have evolved. They're not only just it used to be, hey, everybody, let's gather around the kitchen table and play Operation or something. And then it moved from board games to computers, to where you're just by necessity and of the technical limitations, you were playing solo. And then it turned into, hey, we're moving from solo up to over to multiplayer, like with World of Warcraft, EverQuest, City of Heroes, still miss you, all those other games. But now there's been that kind of push to not just multiplayer, but to have a good solid solo player campaign, which it's really weird. It's like everything old is new again. So I just thought it was a interesting kind of thing.
Mildred, you're muted.
Actually, Christiana, what was the name of both the journaling one you were talking about and the map one? I didn't quite catch it, and I'm trying to look it up.
Oh, sure. So the journaling one that I played is called Field Guide to Memory, and that was done by a person named Jeon Shim. So Jeeyon. Field Guide to Memory. And in fact, they actually also just completed a Kickstarter for their follow-up game called The Shape of Shadows. And those, so the Field Guide to Memory, the way that worked is you could get it all at once if you wanted, but the sort of presented way to play is that you signed up for this email list, and every day you would get the new prompt that would say, this or that happened to your character. Write up a diary page of how they felt about it, and then draw a small map of the place you went on a walk or something like that. And then every day would be a little different. Don't have it at my desk right now. I should have brought over my journal that I made from it, because they encourage you to get like physical artifacts and tape them in like it's a scrapbook and that sort of thing. And so that's a lot of fun. And there are other games that are kind of like that, designed to just give you a story prompt and then you write in it like a diary. But then the map drawing ones that I mentioned, there's three of them by the same person called named Anna Blackwell, that wrote Delve, which is about a bunch of dwarves digging a mine. And then there's also Rise, which is like it's like the reverse. It's like you are an ancient evil trying to rise up to reach the surface and unleash hell upon the world. And then there's Umbra, which is kind of it's base building sci-fi, but the way those work generally is just that he's like, okay, we would like to expand in this direction, and you're drawing on a grid. So you draw your little command module in a 1-inch square, and you say, okay, we want to expand to the east. What's there? And then that's where you draw a card, and it says, okay, you find resources based on that card, or you got the Jack of Clubs, which means you find an ancient monster that awakens at your presence, and you have various mechanics to deal with those things. There's also a number of other games that are based on map building that are more designed for groups of people, but could easily be adapted for solo play, like The Quiet Year, for example.
When you were talking about Rise, I kept thinking of the cicadas.
Oh, yeah.
And Delve would work too, because they're going to go back underground.
Mm. But
I was more thinking of, so what happens when they meet?
Well, you could certainly play that out. I mean, to some extent, though, that each game is somewhat designed to simulate that already, though, because, when you are delving and you're creating this mine, you are coming up against these various threats and dangers and everything that you're having to overcome in order to continue your mine. And it's the reverse. When you're the ancient evil rising up, there's, do-gooders and adventurers trying to stop you. And I believe there's a new one that's similar in that kind of vein, but maybe less focused on drawing the map, but in a similar mechanic called You Are the Dungeon, that there's been some actual plays of recently. I believe that's in Kickstarter right now.
So there's a board game called Dungeon Lords where you're running the dungeon, and these pesky adventurers keep messing things up for you. So it's the same sort of thing.
I would guess so. I don't know that board game specifically, but I think there's been a number of takes on the concept over the years.
Yeah, a Dungeon Keeper was probably the most famous before EA decided to kill it. There's a new one actually called Legend of the Keepers, which is it's a dungeon management game where you have to take care of your critters, give them therapy, give them beer, give them whatever, give them hugs or whatever, and you just and tongue is firmly planted in cheek. It's not to be taken seriously, but it's a lot of fun. It's still in early access on Steam, but it's fun for a little while, at least what they have right now.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any final thoughts, I still see no questions from the audience, who are obviously falling down on the job because they can't think of anything to ask us. So
we're just that good. Come on, give us some credit.
So I'm going to go around one last time, and if you have any final thoughts, or we could end early. I don't think anyone's going to go over to the Discord afterwards.
I mean, I'm available too if there are.
Right, but I don't think there's any need for that at this point. So Mildred, do you have any final thoughts? Anything else you want to add? Muted again. There you go.
I think I try to unmute myself and then you mute.
I haven't touched anything.
Okay, that's
it's
weird.
all you.
Anyway, or it's just my computer. I think any final thoughts that I've got are, if there's a particular game you like in multiplayer mode, see if there is if not the same game in solo mode, but a similar game. Like the game Risk is usually a player versus player game, but you can find various versions that like one old one I've got on my phone is called Slay, and it's basically Risk, but it's you playing against an AI. Strategery is the same. You can find games that are very similar, that some have the serial numbers filed off of them much better than others. That will give you a very similar experience. But yeah, definitely don't expect the experience to be the same. But it can be quite rewarding to like not have to listen to other people arguing.
We're telling you what to do. Alyssa, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I just have a suggestion and a bit of a question. One genre I didn't think about is escape rooms were really popular before the pandemic. And I know it's not tabletop gaming, but it is a bit of a game experience, sort of a puzzle game. And I do think there are a lot of virtual versions of that during all this that you could play alone or with other people. So those might be worth checking out if you have a hankering for puzzles. And then I am curious to know what gaming is going to look like after all this, because it felt like there was a rush to make experiences that connected people during all this, and also, in a weird way, a rush to make things that people could play while totally isolated. So I'm kind of curious to see what the majority of games that are going to come out of this development period are going to be like. And it should be kind of an exciting time, I think, because people had some isolated time to think about it and come up with lots of interesting games. So just looking forward to that.
Thank you. John, final thoughts?
What I would say is, if you see, don't be afraid to go out and look for something you want to play. Guaranteed, there is a genre out there for you, probably multiple. If it's on Kickstarter, if it's in early access, if it's just, if it's not out there, make your own. Okay. Just go out there, make your own. Who knows? You may be the next Gary Gygax or something. Who knows? But you could do that. And I think that what we're going to see, like Alyssa was talking about, games coming out of this. What we're going to see is we're going to probably see a lot of folks who actually did write games, and they went and said, hey, here it is. And we'll see that. We'll see the results of that probably in the next 6 to 8 months. Who knows? So support your creators.
And Christiana.
So I love playing all sorts of games with other people, but like there are lots of times where that's just not one of the available options, or it may be times when, you know what, I just spent a lot of time around people and I'm kind of ready to just be by myself right now, and all of those are totally valid. And um I think there can be a tendency to assume that, like I think people know about solo video games, and I play lots of those, so I'm not implying that there's anything wrong with those, but I think that there can be an assumption that some of these other games, like tabletop role-playing games or like these complicated board games, that like those are really only for playing with groups, when there are ways and options to play them solo, and it can be a very rewarding experience. And so I think that in particular, some of these tabletop solo mode games, I think that's a very rewarding experience. I think more people should check it out.
Okay, well, thank you. And still no questions from the audience. So I think we're going to end, like 5 minutes early. So for those of you who are still around in the Con Suite breakout room at 7, I'm doing the Pandemic Discoveries social hour, where we talk about what kept us sane through the pandemic, which could include games, also television and movies and podcasts and you name it. So it's a discussion group. So, I'm not prepared to sit there and just like talk to everybody, but anyone is welcome to come and put in your suggestions, bring a notepad, because I'm sure you'll want to write stuff down. Anyone else want to plug anything else they're doing? Go ahead, Mildred. You're muted again. There you go.
There we go. At 7 o'clock in Pride of Baltimore 2, technically, I'm doing a presentation on 19th century gambling. And I've tried to make sure I don't just focus on the United States Wild West that most people think about. So I've got locations and games spanning the globe.
So not just Pharaoh.
not just Pharaoh, but bonus points for knowing about Pharaoh.
Deadwood.
Oh yeah, they actually did their research on it, but I also know why everyone thinks of poker and not Pharaoh. Blame
Okay, anyone
Hollywood.
else? John, you want to plug something?
Yeah, I'll be at the St. George Room in half an hour for Fantasy Without Magic. Like I said, I also put out my 13th book a couple months ago. It's in the Stratford Chronicles series, a fantasy noir series, which I've got at least a couple of pairs of fans, and pretty much it's Magnum PI meets American Gods. So, that's kind of my thing. I'm also working on a serial of post-apocalyptic Western, which will be out eventually.
Christiana, you want to plug anything?
Sure. So just later tonight at 10 p.m., I'm going to be in the How to Create Compelling Audio panel. That should be fun. And then also I'm in a number of other gaming panels over this weekend. But also, if you want to check out So Many Levels, that's my YouTube or live streamed gaming content, and sometimes I've got some of my Ironsworn or Starforged plays up there. Also, our Dungeons and Dragons campaign; those are all also available as audio podcasts, and you can find all of that stuff at ChristianaEllis.com.
And Alyssa, our artist guest of honor. You must have a slideshow scheduled, right?
I do. First, there is a art show reception tonight, I believe at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and I think it'll be on Gather. So if you want to talk to various artists, that should be a good time. And then, as you said, on Sunday, I do have my guest of honor and presentation. I think that's 1 p.m. Eastern, and it is about book covers, but I do spend 10 minutes talking about my time in game development. So if you want to slog through my presentation for those 10 minutes, please drop by.
Oh, and I guess I should put in a plug for the game room, which is its own separate Zoom thing, which is Federal Hill. We're doing a bunch of online games using the audio from Zoom and going out to something like Board Game Arena and actually playing the games. I'm running 3 games tomorrow, and there's a bunch of other games going throughout the weekend. So that is Balticon gaming. There is some. Not a lot, but some. And so now I think we are pretty much out of time. So still no questions from the audience. So I guess we covered everything they possibly wanted to know, or they fell asleep. I don't know.
Thanks
so
for
thank
being
you all.
Moderator.
You're
Well,
welcome.
we had some activity in the chat.
In the chat, but
there
that wasn't
weren't
questions. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And there is a link to the Discord. And there is a Gather link too, but all right. Okay, so that's it. See you all at the con. Bye.
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 Thanks, Al. Bye.